What is going on, Chiefs Kingdom? Welcome back to another episode of The Kingdom Says. I am your host, as always, Garrett Williams, and I've got my two usual co-hosts with me today. Kyle, how are we doing today, sir?
Doing well, getting closer and closer to the draft, getting ready for that. So excited to be back and talk some more prospects and I guess some wide receiver news, Chiefs adjacent news, because that happened
Yeah,
this week too.
exactly. And also, of course, Arrowhead Tom, our resident NFL draft expert, the man, the myth, the legend himself. Tom, how we doing, sir?
I'm doing well. I don't want to say I'm excited to talk about wide receivers because I'm not, but I am excited to talk about the draft. And I think with the wide receivers news this week, no news is good news for Kansas City. But Garrett, I'll let you lead us into that conversation.
Yeah, there was a little bit of news, but yeah, wide receiver is the conversation piece today for the Chiefs. Around the NFL, we did have one big name wide receiver signing. Odell Beckham Jr. signs a 1-year, $15 million deal guaranteed with 18 total with the Ravens. Um, that same Ravens team that doesn't even have a contract with their quarterback at the moment. Big step in free agency. I think the Chiefs would never have been anywhere near that number. It seems like the Ravens are kind of anticipating him to be their wide receiver one, which he's 30 some years old off 2 torn ACLs, but was a very surprising number to say the least. But that finally ended the whole conversation of OBJ to the Chiefs. How do we feel about it, folks? How do we feel?
Um, Absolutely not.
Yep.
Never,
Safe to
ever,
say.
ever, ever. Partially the reason the Chiefs are out of this conversation is because they don't structure deals the way the rest of the NFL does. We don't use void
Yeah.
years like that
Void
in
years.
Kansas City.
Yeah, no, not
Odell's
gonna
cap
happen.
hit this year is like $4 million. And then when he's not playing for them next year, it's like 11. And then like 2 or 3 after that for the like 2 or 3 more years after that. Okay. And that's because they basically said, how can we get Lamar to agree to play here either under the tag or get him to sign a deal? Well, we're probably not getting him to sign a deal, so we're going to have him play here. What do we got to give him? Well, if we give Odell a $15 million deal this year, but we'll have to split it out over 5. The cap will go up, so those numbers will just disappear. I was stunned that the Ravens did that. That is not what
Very stunning.
Baltimore typically does. That's Eric DaCosta. That is not Ozzie anymore in that front office, very clearly. Now I was still a bit surprised because Eric has basically been an Ozzie clone since he took over,
Mhm.
which is a good idea for those keeping track at home. Ozzie was one of the best GMs ever in the league.
Yes.
So doing things the way Ozzie does them is not a bad thing, folks.
Yeah,
It's not a
not bad
negative.
steps to follow in.
So it was weird. It's still weird. I get why they pulled the trigger and I think we're kind of backed themselves into a corner, especially after said GM pissed off his wide receiver room at the combine with the comments he made about the wide receivers in that room. So the Chiefs weren't in at 15 million for the year. I can tell you that for 1,000% fact, and I don't need any freaking sources for that one either. That one's duh. $4 million cap hit sounds more like where the Chiefs might have been in the market for. But when Baltimore decides to offer him 15 and then eat it all on their own on the back end, you're not in that market anymore.
Yeah.
I found it
Hard to top
interesting that
that.
he didn't even give New York a shot.
Well, I think yeah, because he was scheduled to visit New York the day he signed. I guess according to
after
reports,
after the Ravens.
yeah, but according to
Yeah,
report, I think he did tell the Jets what the Ravens offered,
and
and
the
then
Jets went, no, thank you.
Yeah,
you could
no,
just
we have to pay Aaron
you can just
still. Have
cancel
you
that
seen
for
Yeah,
his
him.
we
cap
still
hit?
gotta. No,
Yeah, so
I
I mean,
listen.
good for OBJ though. 'Cause,
Mm.
I
Hey,
think
bro, hats
that
off. Congrats on the bag. Now,
yeah,
yeah,
you get the
I mean he's
bag.
already
but
tremendously bagged.
what you said about contender,
Well, that was always the
I
thing. I feel like in
not
the
I'm not
OBJ,
taking shots at Baltimore. They
I'll
could
take
do
yeah,
some
shots at
more.
Baltimore.
They could do some things
not a
in this
contender.
offseason to bolster themselves, but right as it stands currently,
Well, and that's the thing, kind of with the OBJ sweepstakes. I thought this season, it's like he already won a ring last year, So it's
Yeah,
like
even
that
if he didn't
that
get to
whole
play in it.
motivation. Yeah, exactly. But like that whole motivation of like ring chasing, like that was kind of over at that point. Like he's basically trying to get one more big contract to kind of close it out. But
Yeah, but that's a 1-year deal. There's no stability in that. So you still got to ball
well,
out
no,
because
you
even
just
though
still
they're
get
paying you,
15 mil guaranteed. I mean, hey, take
oh
that
yeah,
one
no,
more
no,
time.
take the, you
Especially
know how
prove it
fast I
year.
would have signed that contract if he was somebody. Come
Oh
on
yeah,
now, I don't
and
care how you structure it.
almost
Give me
kind
the
of
15 mil.
a
Bye.
and almost kind of a prove it year coming off the torn
Mhm.
ACLs. You know,
Sure.
True, maybe get
But a
another
prove it year at
long-term deal.
15 at the highest number we've seen for a wide receiver this season.
15 guaranteed.
Yeah.
The other numbers were in the 13s and not fully guaranteed.
Yeah, and that's money that's going to a guy who hasn't had a 1,000-yard season since 2019. Listen,
And hasn't played a full season since 2019.
Also,
I get it. You got to take a swing. I just don't think this is a needle mover, and I think that's the biggest one is the perception. This is free agency. We talked about this early in the offseason when we're talking about the Orlando Brown situation, right? Brett Veach, he's going to have a price for a guy, and he is not moving off that price. And I guarantee you, I think there were some jokes about, Odell made a tweet a couple months ago about something like, I just want more than $4 million. And people were like, oh, Brett Veach negotiations leaked. Well, that wouldn't surprise me if he said, hey, we'll give you $4 million
also,
guaranteed.
He got $4 million this year. Technically,
Yeah, so
like this year's cap is $4.8 million or whatever it is.
That's like if he really wanted to go to a contender, then yeah, he would have.
Correct.
Yeah. I mean, everybody wants to go to a contender until you see how much the contenders are offering, because the contenders have more competitive rosters and they're not that worried about fishing for guys who are on the market.
And this goes back to what happens in free agency, which we also talked about in the same conversation you're referencing right now. What happens in free agency? What do you do in free agency? You overpay every single time.
Yeah.
I don't care who the guy is. You're going to overpay 99% of the time because you're having to go out and bring them in.
So I'm going to say this, and this might be really bad for my brand or whatever. I'm not good at gambling or betting. I don't know how to do this. But if you're listening to this podcast and there's whenever the lines come out, whatever, if you can bet that Odell Beckham has under 1,000 yards, I'd put money on that. I'd put a good chunk. I'd put all the money in my little change bucket right here.
I don't know.
Probably
at least throw the ball enough times for him to get 1,000 yards.
Well, also,
I don't think
for the Ravens though, is they don't really need him to have 1,000 yards, right? It's just they kind of need him to. They need him for that last half of the season.
They need him for attention
playoffs.
a lot. They need him to draw attention. They need him. They need. Because
and like you said, it is kind of
the rest of that wide receiver
pleaser.
room can't get open. No offense to some of those guys in that room right now, they're not getting open. Now if the receivers are blaming the coordinator, and the coordinator and coaches are blaming the staff and the receivers, so that's not a great look. But either way, those dudes aren't getting open. And what Odell does is he opens up space on the field just because Odell exists on the field. As long as he is 85, 90% of what he was before, he'll do what they want him to do, even if it's not 1,000 yards.
Yeah.
Now. I am curious to see if Lamar's going to force him the football and make himself not as effective and efficient as he might be if otherwise, because we've seen that in the past with star quarterbacks and star receivers developing a love affair and forcing footballs.
Yeah, it's going to be something to watch for sure.
I just think that it's.
But saying that's if Lamar plays in Baltimore on the tag, and that would be, by the way, both of those dudes on a prove it deal.
Yeah, a lot of what ifs in that whole situation around.
Yeah,
Baltimore.
that's what's so weird for Baltimore. They don't do
the if
stuff
move.
very often.
I know.
They don't
almost
do that.
Well, it kind of, it almost feels like a response to like the rest of the division, right? Because for a while Baltimore was the top of the division. All of a sudden you have the Bengals coming up. You have the Browns who are contending. The Steelers are kind of, but it's like I think
Steelers,
like I said,
Steelers never go
there.
away. They're never bad.
I mean, they're always there. I mean, Mike Tomlin never had a losing season still. So
still crazy.
All of a sudden, the division has heated up a lot more, and now you're kind of making swings that you're really hoping.
Well,
to hit
and that's the part that's always been the thing that the Ravens don't do is they don't reach and they don't take the big overreaching swings. And this,
but if you think about
the last little bit, it just feels very swingy.
Yeah, well, if you think about like their past couple draft classes, they haven't been superstar draft classes like we've seen from the Ozzie Newsome classes in the past.
You know who I'm really glad the Chiefs didn't draft that I wanted them to draft really bad, that I wanted them to draft in the first round when they took Clyde instead?
Rashad Bateman?
Patrick Queen.
Oh.
I was big on Patrick Queen that year.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the thing. There's been
Baltimore took him right in front of us, and
just kind of
he has not lived up to expectations, shall we say.
Yeah, I'm not shocked by that one. But anyways,
So
yeah,
that's what happens
Odell.
when you don't hit on the draft. You have to make swings like that, like Odell Beckham Jr.
Well, I feel like,
So
well, again, I feel like it's something that, as Kyle was alluding to, we don't see Baltimore do a lot, and it feels like a desperation move. Because here's what I've gathered from some of the other tweets: is no other team was even close. So
No.
essentially that report came out, and the Ravens made they changed their offer to Odell, and yeah, he gave the Jets a chance to match it, right? Knowing
so,
that
yeah.
if Aaron Rodgers lands there, more than likely, like we all expect, you've got a better overall, I would say a better overall offense, like at least an offensive identity there. I think
Oh
some
yeah.
foundation
No,
pieces
that's fair
versus
because they're changing
because
offensive coordinators in
well, you
Baltimore
don't
right
know,
now, and
you don't even know if Lamar's for sure going to be back. I know that this move is like, oh, they're bringing Lamar back, but
well,
are they?
that's the
Will
other part
they?
of that's what this move is for. This is the other part of the desperation. They had to do something to try to get him to at least play this year for them because they don't really have other options right now.
Well, I'm also
I mean, Pro
curious.
Bowl quarterback Tyler Huntley is still on the roster. Kyle, come
Pro
on.
Bowl alternate number 18, Tyler Huntley was on the.
Yeah.
Well,
No,
the Ravens don't have a ton of cap space, and one of the things that's interesting to me, so Lamar Jackson's on the non-exclusive tag, right? I don't know, somebody smarter than me would have to be able to do this, but I'm thinking, what could a team come in and sign? This hasn't happened in a while, but essentially what's called a poison pill contract,
Mhm.
which is the Ravens can't fiscally match it without either cutting some people from their teams,
yeah.
or
It would
accepting
have to be a team that had the cap space to eat that poison pill contract if it had to be signed off on and was willing to cough up the 2 first-round picks because that's
Mhm.
the other part of that tag.
So a team like, I don't know, the Colts,
Colts has,
or who
well,
may
yeah,
end
you
up
need
on the
cap
outside
space.
looking in for a
Eric
quarterback, right?
Bieniemy and Washington football
You
team
need
and
cap
Ron
space and you
Rivera and
need
company.
payroll too,
Yeah,
though,
I'm
because that's a lot of
looking.
guaranteed money. That has
Yeah,
been a conversation though, Tom, about the
it would
team
be a pretty
potentially
big
just
cap hit. I don't actually
offering a
looking at it.
contract that the Ravens just really can't match. But
So let me
it's
look.
also, I feel like it's more kind of
32.
confirmed
But
now that
what
like
team is also willing to put that much bet on a guy who we just talked about? The receiver hasn't played a full season in 2 or 3 years, and that quarterback hasn't either.
I mean, and so here's the other one.
Yeah.
And so you could do this after the draft too, right? So
You
in
could.
theory, you could trade down this year and try to pick up an extra first next year, and then it's not that big of a deal to lose.
Theoretically, yes, because the deadline for negotiating the tag stuff is July or whatever.
All right, here's my, let's play Madden for a minute.
Mhm.
I'm taking
It's
over the
always fun.
Detroit Lions.
Yeah.
I'm going to the
That's
draft
a
and trading
team.
down. I'm getting an extra first round pick, and then
You're giving him Jared
I
Goff to go back the
if
other
I
way to try
cut
to balance the contract out.
if I cut Jared Goff, or if I trade him off somewhere else, I go from 25 million to 41 million in cap space, which is enough to offer
The poison pill
Lamar Jackson
contract
more money
and the
this year.
picks.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, again,
And you upgrade your
crazy
roster
things,
a
but
lot in Detroit.
there's a lot of uncertainty.
Can you imagine Lamar in Detroit with Mr. Eating Kneecaps, Dan Campbell?
Oh,
Yeah.
that would be so much fun.
To television. Can we have a
Oh,
Hard Knocks
listen,
all year round,
I'm not saying that
24/7?
they should make me an NFL GM, but
Well, I
I'm just
think
kidding.
from what I've kind of heard around the whole Lamar situation, this is kind of going off topic. And we're really diving into it, but it almost feels like
The off season. We can talk about draft
it
in a
is the
minute.
off season, but it feels like really it's going to go one of two ways. Either a team makes an offer on the offer sheet to Lamar, and then the Ravens just immediately match it, and just like boom, someone else worked out the deal for us essentially,
Or
or you have Lamar sign the tag and then negotiate a sign and trade type thing. That's what, in my sense, is kind of where
without
it's
an
going.
agent?
Well, yeah, I mean it's tough, but either I mean Lamar needs an agent. That's kind of that's the biggest thing that he needs. But this is going to be a really
that's
weird
a separate
situation.
topic entirely, but that factor matters because no offense to Mama, but Mama negotiating with NFL GMs on a sign and trade is not exactly how I would ask my mom to handle my business decisions. Let's put it that way.
No.
And it's nothing to do against my mother or anyone else's mother, unless that's their actual job. I would
Yeah.
prefer to get someone whose actual job that is.
So, yeah, it's
Very
interesting
interesting.
times in the NFL.
Almost, and
Interesting.
Like I
the
said,
last
the
thing,
most crazy thing is the Baltimore doing the stuff that they did to get here.
yeah, and getting the whole the big swing with OBJ. The last thing to close it out. I feel like Baltimore has to have known a little bit more, obviously, about what the situation is with Lamar. Because do you think OBJ accepts that contract if he doesn't know that there's
That
at
was
least a
my
good
question.
chance that Lamar comes back?
That was my
Like,
question immediately for Odell is you
what do
agreed
you
to a
know?
deal before
Mhm.
they've inked the quarterback that they're
Mhm.
telling you is going to play there.
Yeah, so that's a lot of trust
Which
Odell's
makes
putting
me
in an
think that the whole
organization he's
contender
never
thing,
worked with, even. So
yeah, the
I
whole
don't know.
contending thing is.
Very
Unless
strange,
he
but
and again, unless Odell knows either from Lamar or from the Ravens or from
could
both that
could actually
Lamar's
be
going to
from
be playing
Lamar.
there this year.
Yeah,
And like I
really
said,
could be
if I'm
from Lamar.
Odell, I need to hear that from Lamar, not
That's
from
the one
Baltimore, because
that's the
I
one
could
guy you
care
need.
less what Baltimore tells
Yeah.
me on
Mhm.
that front.
So, anyways, OBJ to the Ravens. He is out of the Chiefs sweepstakes. Basically, well, actually, the Chiefs did sign a wide receiver we haven't talked about, Richie
Yeah,
James. Yeah,
Richie
Richie
James.
James. Yeah.
Richie James.
Shout out
Interesting
Richie
guy.
James.
Interesting signing. Uh, Kind of a speed gadget.
he's a
And a little
specialist.
bit of vertical stuff. I wouldn't surprise if we get some special team snaps. But I don't know. He looked pretty good for the Giants last year, which is hard to do because it's the Giants. But
Right.
he put up okay numbers. I mean, if he's the fourth or fifth receiver on your roster, you don't feel terrible. Now, if he's starting long periods of times, I'm a little nervous.
Yeah.
But beyond that, like, yeah, I don't particularly
I
care
think
for that.
I
But
think
yeah, it happened.
realistically, it's more of a you know Justin Watson potential replacement, like wide receiver 6, type
Yeah,
guy that
it's a death move, and
he's
it's
gonna
not
get some
again
special teams
before.
snaps. He can do. He has a lot
Mhm.
of punt return experience. He had some, like I said, he had some decent receiving moments with the Giants and the 49ers when the team he was with
Mhm.
previously. I think it's
Yeah.
kind of interesting that that we now have Kadarius Toney and Richie James, two former Giants wide receivers last year, and the wide receiver group from the Giants wasn't very good last year, so that's kind of something to think about. But yeah, just a little. Like I said, it's kind of like Kyle said, kind of a gadget kind of guy. Not really. He might not even really make the team. Not a guy who you would realistically rely on, but he's just another guy that you can kind of add into
I
the
think
mix and shake it up.
I think you're going to see him and Mir Smith Marset compete for either
Mhm.
punt return, kick return
Amir Smith
duties, and that
Marset,
and that
Donald.
Justin Watson spot, because I don't think Justin Watson's coming back. I don't know what happened. I really don't know what's going on, but he doesn't appear to be
He got a
returning.
ring.
So,
He got a ring. He'll probably
um,
move
but
on
with
somewhere.
with
Yeah.
those two, I think that's the I don't want Sky Moore returning punts and kicks anymore. I don't
Definitely.
want Kadarius Toney back there at all because we don't need to risk him in injury unless we
Right.
absolutely need to Tyreek
If you're
Hill
gonna
it and try to
use
make a game breaking play.
if you're gonna
I'm gonna
use
give
KT in a
you
wide receiver 1 role, then you're not
yeah.
gonna have him
So
punt
they
returning.
take and they add Amir Smith Marset, who they added at the end of last year, I think, on a futures
Yeah.
contract after the practice squad,
Super Bowl
and they
champion.
add this kid from the Giants, Richie James, who played in whose system last year.
Oh, Mike Kafka. Yeah.
Okay, so and again,
Well,
the
the answer.
Giants wide
That
receivers
makes sense.
were bad, but that was the wide receivers in front of these guys, and when Richie got snaps, he put up decent numbers for when he actually got on the field. Now,
He didn't
Yeah.
suck too much.
and his quarterback was
That's
still
good.
Danny Dimes. So again, like now I know the Giants just paid him like $40 million, but that's because he was next, not because he was worth it. There's a difference. Yeah, like he's going to be a special teamer in the sixth wide receiver, probably either one of those two guys I just mentioned,
Yeah.
if at all, if not a practice squad elevational call up type situation for those guys.
Right. Yeah.
It's great, but that's all about that. All that it is.
Does not move the needle. Moves the needle as much as OBJ
It
basically
adds
does.
depth, which you always want to add, and you want to make sure you have at that position because, as we saw last year,
Does add some
attrition
good depth.
happens at that position.
Yes,
Yeah,
it
we don't
does.
need any more Marcus Kemp
And can't have any.
elevations.
It cannot hurt to have him have time in a similar, if not identical, system to Andy. And I say identical because it was Kafka's first year as an offensive coordinator, and typically, first year OCs go with exactly what they're really familiar and comfortable with, and that would be Andy's playbook for the last, I don't know, 5 or 6 years of Kafka's life. So he
Well,
probably didn't do too much of his own experimentation in that inaugural season, other than adapting the game plan to Danny's strengths versus Patrick's.
Well, and it's not bad to have insurance in case you don't get one of the really tiny, fast or allegedly fast wide receivers,
Right,
slot wide
yeah.
receivers in the
There's
2023
there's
draft,
not
which
enough
is
of those.
Hey,
essentially
Tom
all
want
of
to transition into his favorite topic that we're supposed to be
Look at that.
talking about.
So yeah,
Look,
that's
I
the
did
main
it.
conversation piece that we're coming in here today. Wide receiver prospects in the NFL draft. Obviously, Tom and Kyle have both been looking at me a little bit, but mostly Tom has been just cracking through some of these wide
Yeah, I have
receivers.
nowhere near caught up. He's still like 800 players.
It
ahead of me.
hurts.
Yeah.
It
So
hurts, guys.
we're gonna break down some.
I'm trying, but
top
you had
guys
like an
here.
8-month head start, bro.
It
But
hurts,
Tom's
man.
been watching these guys for a while. So without further ado, Tom, where do you kind of want to start? Obviously, round one has been a big
No.
conversation.
Nope.
No. Okay,
Mhm.
never mind.
I want to
Yeah.
start with a question you guys answer. All
Okay.
right, blank slate. We're gonna build a wide receiver. Let's keep it real here. The Chiefs need a wide receiver. Don't say Randy Moss. But all right, how tall do you want this receiver to be? Minimum
10.
6
minimum.
foot?
6 foot.
5'11" at the worstest?
5'11" minimum.
Sure.
All right. So that rules out
Everybody.
almost everybody.
I don't care.
Honestly,
Because I
the height
think-
doesn't matter
I
as
really
much
don't
to
care
me,
about
to
the
be
height.
truthful.
Yeah.
If he's 5'9" and has a 40-inch vert, I don't give a flying
That does
friggity
make up for it.
frick
All
if
right.
he's 5'9".
That do make
Well,
up
let's.
for it.
You got to entertain me. I think 5'11's fair, right? Because we're probably looking. Okay, what the Chiefs really need is an outside receiver, correct?
A
'Cause they've got
versatile outside
some-
receiver.
They've got some
Sure.
guys who
Yeah.
can play inside, who can be moved around. Kadarius Toney, Sky Moore,
Do have a lot of
um,
inside guys.
MVS
also thrive a
kind of
lot.
plays a role on the outside, but
Mostly a deep threat.
yeah, mostly a one-trick pony kind of thing. So this might be like collectively one of the smallest wide receiver groups that the NFL's seen in a draft class in a minute. And
Just what we needed.
you
Exactly.
here, the phrases as I've because I have no I listen to a lot of what other people think, a lot of other evaluators. I read what a lot of other evaluators think. The frame the term undersized or short or
slight
frame. Yep, slight frame. Not good at contested catches.
Trouble in traffic.
Yeah.
Bad contact balance.
So that's 50-50, but
Or
those are common
or
themes.
average contact balance.
They are
no
common
contact
themes
balance.
in the draft.
Which is a made up thing for those of you not keeping track of home. Contact balance doesn't actually exist.
What?
Okay, all right. That's a post draft
Jamal
argument.
Charles, bro.
So
Time out.
King of contact.
Time out.
no.
This is
We're gonna
really
get into this
simple.
and we're gonna go over.
It's a semantics argument for me on that
Okay.
end, by the way. It's not a real stat. It's just
Okay.
how they try to talk about it and quantify it is not what it actually
Hey,
is
I-
measuring.
I have a non-real stat to bring up later as well. So
Yeah, I know. We're gonna get into those.
I'm a big fan of
No.
non-real stats personally. I don't like normal ass stats. Give me the non-real ones. Some might call them fake.
You've
but
been hanging
not
out
me.
on a certain Twitter timeline too much. I think. It's
All right,
orange,
let's
not
talk
rhymes
about-
with kitty cat.
Tom's
Let's
the one
talk
with
about the
beard
top
here,
end.
alright?
Let's talk about the top end of this draft class. Let's just rip the Band-Aid off.
Do it.
All right. So I'm using the NFL mock draft database consensus big board.
We
just
can shrink the
because-
top end of the conversation easy. Tom, is
Yeah.
there a wide receiver between 15 and 31 that you would either A, move up for, or B, draft at the slot?
Quentin Johnston.
At 31 or move up?
I would move up maybe 5 or 6 spaces for him. I'd give up no more than a fourth to do that.
Okay.
So Garrett is gonna
What?
explode through
NFL.
his hat in what NFL? Yeah.
But no, I don't think you're moving up a couple spots with just a fourth round pick.
Well, you're
not
moving
today's
up
NFL.
4 or 5
couple
spots. Moving
spots.
up a third or a fourth
Not in
probably
today's
gets you.
NFL.
Yeah.
It's going to be a
I
third
think-
minimum.
At the
But
end of the
yeah.
draft. Listen, it depends on which GM you're talking to, because the Vikings GM apparently doesn't know what to do.
Yeah,
so
you're right. Massive dump.
Quentin Johnston has the size.
DeAndre Hopkins got traded for a running back in a 7th. Who knows?
Yeah. Johnston has the size. The thing with like with him is people want him to be something that he's not. People look at him and they go, "Oh, okay, he's 6'3", he's
A big
big
wide
bodied.
receiver.
We want him to be DK Metcalf, go downfield and just body people." That's actually not who he is. Not at all. He might be that big, but he plays.
Very
But his
small.
let me rephrase that. His best skills are that of like an underneath receiver, of a guy that you're going to move around, of a guy who's going to come across the field, right? He's I don't want to say he's a slot guy, but
He's
he
your intermediate
functions.
threat.
Yeah, he functions a lot of as a big slot. I shared this pre-show, and I'm not. I have no shame in telling you guys. Like I said, I do a lot of scouting. I've worked like I thought so hard on. I've been working on this comp for Quentin Johnson because I just don't have it. For a while, I was almost going to compare him to Dwayne Bowe because
Uh-oh.
Uh-oh. Tom froze for a second.
Uh-oh.
Let's see if he comes back.
there's
The
You
Dwayne.
mentioned
there's my
Dwayne.
graphic cards.
Oh,
Dwayne
graphic
Bowe.
card.
Yeah, I was going to
Dwayne
compare
Bowe.
him to Dwayne Bowe. I'm back. Yeah, no, my graphics card had to catch up for a minute.
Classic.
Because he does have a lot of yak skill. He's like isn't like Dwayne Bowe is a big guy, but he didn't always play the biggest, right? And that's where people were frustrated with him. Like, you know, he's not going to be Devontae Adams, right? I felt like that was and I know that's like, okay, you're a Chiefs fan making a Chiefs, but it made like that was the last time I saw a receiver who was like that size, whose biggest asset was yards after the catch, like underneath, you know, those quick slant routes. How many times did we see? And you know, and about 50% of the times, Matt Castle or Tyler Palko was, you know, chucking them into the third rows of the stands. But the other 50% of the time, you know, Dwayne Bowe is catching that, you know, 3-yard slant and then, you know, rumbling down for about, you know, another 5 or 6, 7 yards.
They're getting blamed for a drop on a ball that was 4 yards behind him that he somehow got fingers on.
Yeah, yeah. So in terms of play style, that's who he reminded me, but I didn't like that comp. And then I was listening to the Athletics Prospect to Pros this morning, and they were and Dane Brugler and Nate Tice were talking about it. And there's somebody else in that episode that I forgot, but I think it was Nate Tice who said his comparison for Quentin Johnson was Brandon Ayuk. And I loved it, and I'm stealing it without shame. Like, he said that, and it clicked, right? This is not your like straight up vertical guy. This is a guy you get the ball into his hands. He's going to do a lot of, you know, he's going to create a lot of yardage that way. And I think that's a good fit for what Kansas City likes to do.
On if I'm remind me, I might be misremembering the last 2 months on our fun-filled Chiefs timeline of Twitter. I vaguely remember a large section of this fan base wanting to trade for a certain Brandon Ayuk.
Listen, I was part of that. I love Brandon Ayuk. I think he's a unique player. Health issues are there, but so Garrett, so you would take Brandon Ayuk.
I would take Brandon Ayuk, not for a first-round pick.
And what conference did Brandon Ayuk play in?
I have no idea. It was the Big 12. Oh no.
No, it was the worst conference.
Worse than that.
Then
actually.
I don't care because I'm against the Big 12. So that's my whole argument. So, Tom, hold on. Let me counter your. I don't want.
Garrett Williams hates Big 12.
I do hate Big 12 football. Tom, what you just told me though. Obviously there's a lot of small slot guys in the draft, but you just told me that Quentin Johnston's best traits are of a slot guy. Like, you're not even getting he's not even an X receiver. Are you getting an X receiver type abilities out of him, or is he just big who plays small? Because that was my concern when I was watching him. Is he's a big guy that just plays like a small guy. I mean, obviously he's got longer strides, so that helps. And yeah, he does run decent routes, but he's not like a huge.
He's got route running
guy.
skills that are something that is different in this draft than a lot of guys have.
Great route running skills versus Big 12 defenders. Let's put an asterisk on that. But yes,
okay,
he does.
And great route running skills against Pac-12 defenders is actually worse. But we can put asterisks next to any of these guys that they play.
I'm not
it's a fair point. No, it's a fair point. Let me see real quick. So I will also say this: Quentin Johnston's testing numbers not pretty. But his one thing he did at the combine that was pretty was his vertical. He had a 40.5-inch vertical. So at 6'3", I think even if he does play smaller, I think that's just like that's his best asset as a receiver. Like, that's his biggest strength. I think he's capable of more. And I think that there's more growth to be had here. The other guy that he made me think of, and this is a little bit of a trip, just watching him, just because this was a guy who, like, was so kind of hot and cold sometimes um, was the Buffalo Bills receiver Stevie. Was it Stevie Johnson? Um,
That was
Oh,
a blast from the
yes.
past. Yeah.
yeah, blast from pass there. Kind of a similarly built guy. Um,
I
who
just
was like a
don't.
flash in the plan sometimes, but
Sure.
wasn't the
Sure. Sure.
most
Sure.
like biggest guy. So I get what you're saying, Garrett, but
Yeah.
I would rather a guy who is somewhat capable of
Who
getting to
has that
that, the
potential?
high point that.
Right. I get what
Yes,
you're
if you
saying.
get
It's just,
yeah.
yeah. When you started off the whole conversation, you said like Kansas City needs an outside X type
Mm-hmm.
receiver, and then he really doesn't seem like he's much of that.
So
Okay, let's do this. Tom, is there an X receiver in this entire draft class
yes,
that isn't going in the top 10?
yes,
Who?
Cedric Tillman
And
out
he's
of
going in the
Tennessee,
4th round, and he
probably third.
might be might be an X receiver at the NFL
No,
level.
no, I'm pretty confident he's a traditional X
Okay,
receiver.
now let me ask you
Okay.
this:
Okay.
how many
Yes.
traditional receivers do the Chiefs employ and have employed in the last Andy Reid era?
Okay.
Okay.
So then
Let
we
me
don't
ask you
need
this
that.
next question: how many wide receivers play one position in any offense in Andy Reid's era, in any Andy Reid system? Okay, so the conversation about X or slot is non-existent for me. What wide
Mhm.
receivers in this
Okay.
class are actually versatile enough to play more
Okay.
than one position?
Perfect. This is
Great.
perfect
And
then,
he's
because
getting ready
all
to
of a
say a name
sudden,
that can't,
well, I'm
and I
just
can't
saying
wait
that
for
all of
it.
a sudden that just opens up a whole revenue of people. If you're not concerned about a guy who's just a slot or just a blah blah blah
No,
fill in
they
the
can't
blank,
be just A. They can't be just A. That's the
yeah.
problem. You have to
So
be able to
that's
be multiple.
so that feels
And
like that
that's
opens up a
or
lot
have
of
the ability
possibilities
to be
then.
multiple.
Mhm.
Because if
You
you
have to
don't have the ability to be versatile, you will not play in this offense.
That
inside out.
is
Well, okay.
very valid.
I will also say this: at the end of the day, I do trust Andy Reid to come up with some Frankenstein style of ways of putting their young players in position to be successful, right? So if they do take a receiver early,
They are
obviously it might
taking a receiver. They're going to take a
yeah,
receiver basically every year that Patrick is the quarterback
they
between
should.
rounds 1 and 3. They will.
Yeah.
Just because if they
Probably,
don't,
yeah.
they're doing themselves a disservice.
So
Get that out of the way now.
Yep.
Quentin Johnson, I'm putting my chips on him just because he has a potential that the other guys don't. I will also say this, Garrett, and this is something to remember when they brought Sammy Watkins in, and he was seen as that big bodied X receiver type of guy. One of the things that, and this is Eric Bieniemy, but I'm sure that Andy Reid's sharing this philosophy, was they talked about the skill that Sammy Watkins had with the ball in his hand,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like almost like a running back. And when I watch Quentin Johnson play, there's a lot of things he doesn't do. You go, okay, he's not a great, struggles with drops. Not a guy who I think has a ton of like vertical long speed. He's got some wasted movement in his routes, all that stuff. Put the ball in his hand, and he'll take a 8-yard slant, 80 yards for the touchdown.
Who's the best wide receiver in this franchise's history?
Tyreek Hill.
Tyreek Hill?
Is that a trick question or Otis Taylor?
No, that wasn't a trick question. That was a very simple
Oh.
question that needed a
Okay.
very simple answer, and you both
I thought we
gave
were
it to
maybe
me.
talking
Okay.
Otis
What
Taylor
is
or something.
Tyreek Hill? Not
5'10".
any
Freak
of.
athlete.
He is not a traditional athlete. He's not a
Super
traditional wide
unicorn.
receiver. Matter of fact, he was a freaking running back at a
was.
recent point in his
Was
career.
Quentin Johnson a
Actually,
running back?
entering the NFL at one point. They don't
Yeah.
care. They drafted McCole over other guys, and it was like, why? Because they don't care necessarily about your wide receiver skills that are developed in college or at that moment. When they
Mhm.
touch the football, are they a difference maker? Yes, no. That is the checkmark box that the Chiefs seem to care most
That
about when
seems
you're
like a
looking
fun
at
little.
wide receivers.
That seems like a fun
That's
little non-real stat right
that
there.
to me is what I'm looking at if I'm looking for Chiefs wide receivers when I'm scouting for this team versus traits or versus what this guy does at this position or how because they don't seem to give about that. They care about once you have it, can you make people look stupid? Because if you can, we can teach you the rest of the crap, the basic stuff. And if we can't, we'll draft another guy who we can, and we'll send you out to go find somebody else to pay you in a few years. And that's what they've done, and that's what they're going to continue to do. So,
Kyle, that sounds like a great description of what the dog factor is. This is something I've talked about it pre-show to these guys. There's a lot of stats, right, in college football and just football in general. But what you can't quantify is who's got that dog in them. That is the thing that you have to consider. Some of these guys, like
Unless I'm quantifying that by giving them the scouts pick designation,
that
just
guy would have that dog in him then.
literal dog.
Yeah, that sounds like that
Just
guy's
throwing
got a
that out
dog in
there.
him then.
So,
But yeah, I'm just saying.
But for the purposes of the discourse and the conversation with the wide receivers, I just feel like we need to we transition away from how we traditionally would have those conversations, because this offense does not give a damn about traditional or any sense or form
That is
of it.
true, and I argued about it. I mean, I think I said this pre-show, but the Chiefs haven't really had an ex wide receiver the past couple years. I mean, Sammy was that in a way, and I guess you can kind of give that to Juju.
He also,
but it's like,
the other thing
we were
people said about
fine.
Sammy is that he played small for a guy his
Right.
size.
So
Just
that's
so we're
been
aware.
my whole thing. It's like the Chiefs don't need an X receiver. They just need a guy who is talented, who can, when you get the ball.
They
in his
need a
hands,
difference maker after
he's
the
a difference
the
maker.
catch.
Well, even maybe before you catch, you gotta get open, right? You gotta find. I mean, Andy will dial you open, but that's not a guarantee. I mean,
Andy will dial you open. Patrick might throw you open.
Listen, we saw a wide receiver.
He might.
When we had a wide receiver group,
might throw it to you while you're not open and still get it to you anyway.
I mean, yeah, there is the corn dog things, but if you think about like a wide receiver room a couple years ago when we had like Byron Pringle and Demarcus Robinson, like those guys weren't exactly eaten when they were on the field. Like they struggled to get open.
D-Rob's biggest problem was actually after the catch. He could get open. He just run the wrong freaking way once he caught it.
Oh my gosh.
My whole thinking is in this first round of wide receivers, Tom, and getting back on track here. Outside of Quentin, obviously, there's some other guys who are still playmakers, right? Who else first round wise is up there?
Okay, so playmakers is a word that makes me go, they are there and they'll make plays. Let's talk about probably the safest guy and the
change the word play
in
to
the
difference.
Class. Yeah. So Jackson Smith and Jigba out of Ohio State, they are the wide receiver factory. Last year they had Chris Olave and Garrett Wilson, who both had great rookie years. Now here's the thing. So Jackson Smith and Jigba was hurt this year, which, stinks. In most cases, you would go, okay, I can look at his 2021 film and feel pretty good about him being a top prospect, right?
Except for the
because he was the most productive, except for the part that he was playing with two other guys who
went in the first round who have had excellent rookie seasons.
And so
with some really crappy quarterbacks in a couple of instances.
Yeah. Now, I will say there are people who have said, Smith and Jigba is the most talented, that type of thing. And he also had a tough spot because he was playing with other freak athletes we're just going to continue to get first round receivers out of Ohio State for the next 5 years, guys. Just prepare
Marvin Harrison Jr. is a freak.
Yeah. So I think Smith and Jigba has like the highest floor and just a very safe ceiling. He feels like a guy who's just going to come into the NFL, have like 5 or 6 seasons of 1,000 yards, then have like 4 seasons of 400 to 700 yards, and then retire. And it was like, that was a good receiver. Solid career. I think he's as safe as it comes, just because his skill set is one that's going to age well, right? He's very technically refined. He does have, I think he came in at 6 foot or 6'1" at the combine. I think he's 6 foot, maybe 6 foot even. A little slighter than I think, and again, that's the theme of the draft. Actually, I take that back. He's 6'1", 196, so he's got a pretty solid build. I don't think his testing numbers were super impressive. 35-inch vertical. His 3-cone was disappointing, but really productive. Just, I think you look at him and you go, all right, here's a solid guy. I think the biggest one is we don't know exactly if you can play him outside. That was the answer that we were hoping to see this year.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't get that. So at minimum, you're getting a reliable, like top end, probably a guy who's going to be considered one of the top slot threats in the NFL, with the potential to do some more, right? But that's a pretty big unknown question mark. Personally, I'm pretty high on Njigba. He's probably going to be my wide receiver 1, just because I think there's so many other risk factors with receivers in this class, even with the guys that I like. If like again, if you're just looking for a guy who you can plug in and rely on for a little bit, that's your guy. If I'm a team with a young quarterback who needs a receiver, I'm taking Smith and Jigba over somebody else because Smith and Jigba is going to be the guy who makes those chains move and makes everybody else looks better.
It makes him comfortable. This is so
probably a
frustrating.
locked in, before you get to your point, Kyle, probably more than likely a locked in 15 pick at least, right?
I'd say top
safe.
20 pretty comfortably.
Top 20
we could
pretty
see a
comfortably.
pretty big. Now, here's the thing with this wide receiver classes: they're stacked so differently depending on. There's so much overlap in terms of this skill set. They're stacked
people could
very
be
similarly.
Anybody.
Yep.
Right.
Because
And
if
they
you
also
told
might
me
not
Smith and
really
Jigba
jump at
was, if you told me he was
top
the first
10.
receiver off the board, I'd believe you. If you told me he was the fifth receiver or the fourth receiver off the board, I'd believe you. Right? If you told me that he went at 15 overall, sure. If you told me that he was sitting there at 31, I'd believe that. I'd probably have a harder time believing that, but it's not out of the realm of possibility because teams view receivers and it's about the flavors and the systems. And so,
pick your flavor.
So let's talk about another flavor.
All right.
Go ahead.
He's fine.
Exactly.
He's also the most boring of all of the wide receiver prospects Ohio State has had for the last 3 to 4 years and probably the next 3 to 4 years.
Yeah.
And it's not a knock, I guess, but it's just if you're going to have that be the number one wide receiver, you would much prefer that be Chris Olave style or with more proof, more pudding, more evidence, more ability to play multiple positions, more proof long time term of doing it than one big breakout season, because we've done this before with one big breakout season, Cornell Powell.
Fifth round pick.
Off an injury. And he's also coming off an injury that ended his whole season after playing 11 snaps last year. Guys post-injury don't always look the same after as they did before. We're talking about the same conversation that Kaiser was just talking about when it comes to Justin Ross. Now, drastically different style of injury as far as severity level, same concept. So, I wouldn't be mad at all that if they ended up with Jackson Smith and Jigba. Like Tom said, he's going to be a solid wide receiver. That's fine. I think it's going to be great. But if you're sitting there and telling me out of the 8, 9, 10 wide receivers that Ohio State's put it out over the last 3 or the next 3, and that's the one we end up with, I'm a little sad. That's all.
Yeah.
I get that.
I don't, this isn't the comp I'll have for him, but Lance Zierlein from NFL.com compared him to Jarvis Landry, and I'm like, that feels about right because nobody's excited about you. You're like,
exactly.
Okay, that's a
Jarvis
good receiver.
Is fine. He's great.
It's fine.
He's good.
Yeah,
he's
good.
He's
Yeah,
Jarvis.
That's fine. That's fine.
He wasn't even the best wide receiver on his own team in college.
I know. And then, you could say the same thing. Listen.
Exactly. That's what I'm getting at.
Let's quick Jarvis Landry.
Because Jarvis is, by the way, the guy that was playing next to him in college is the guy that they just paid $18 million in Baltimore.
Let's look quick Jarvis Landry.
I'm not mixing that timeline, right? Odell was there with Jarvis. I'm not.
Yeah.
That's why they reunited.
That's why they reunited in Cleveland. I'm not losing my mind.
Here's Jarvis. 758 his rookie year, 1100 his sophomore year, 1100 his third year, 987, 976, 840. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of
and a couple of those are with the freaking Browns.
Yeah.
So
then,
it's like you get you get some bonus credits on yardage because you're playing
the Dolphins
with the Browns.
And then he fell off and
has
900. Nobody is upset.
Wait a minute, wasn't that 900 yards with Ryan Fitzpatrick and Gardner Minshew or some ghost of Christmas? No, Minshew was in Jacksonville. Whatever other person,
whoever it was.
Oh, it was Nick Foles.
Would have been down there.
No,
Nick
Fitz was there. Fitz was there. Who else was in the Miami with him? Was it Thigpen?
Matt Moore.
I remember Tyler Thigpen and Chad Henne being there at one point.
Matt Moore.
I don't remember. But anyways, that's
But the point
Jackson
is,
Smith.
Jarvis is. Oh yeah, it's Jarvis.
Fine. Yeah.
He's fine.
Yeah.
Nobody's upset about
a
it.
Receiver that's got some juice. That'd be the next guy on Tom's list, I think.
Let's talk about the
one.
next guy. The next guy on my list to talk about who has something. It's hard for me. Okay, it's hard for me to be just like, and I said this before the show. Ultra productive. There's a lot of people who like him. I see the skills as a route runner. I see the skills on the field. At the same time, I don't get it. like we talk about, like, oh, okay. The other thing that's concerning, so we're talking about Jordan Addison out of USC.
Jordan Addison.
The other thing that's concerning, he came into the combine at 173 pounds and ran a 4.49, right? Which is not bad, but it's not. If you're weighing 173 pounds,
It's not bad if you
you
didn't
should
weigh.
run better than that.
If we want,
That's my personal opinion.
Underwear Olympics stats.
And again,
also, was that the whole? The other thing I don't know is if that time was at the combine or was at his pro day.
It was at the combine.
That was his
he
combine
didn't run at the pro day.
He shouldn't have run at the pro day because if you guys didn't see what happened at USC's pro day,
oh, it was awful.
It was a absolute monsoon.
Rain. Yeah.
So let's and again. I stole this. I'm stealing this comp unless I change my mind. But the one that came to mind that I really liked, again, from the Athletic. They just dropped it a couple days ago. If you're listening to this, you should go listen to it.
Beast and the Beast is out too, by the way.
The Beast is also out. But Jordan Addison, they comped him to Emmanuel Sanders, and that's another one where it's like, yeah, okay, cool. In fact, I'd probably want Emmanuel Sanders a little more than Jarvis Landry.
Because he has a little more of that game breaking. I can do something special.
Yeah,
thing.
but here's my concern. 173 is really, really on the low end of the weight spectrum, and I already had concerns about Addison's place. Like, my biggest concern about him was his ability to play through press, which he didn't see a lot of in the Pac-12.
So I was going to ask you, because that's what I struggled with when I watched him, is he struggles in press coverage.
Yeah. So again,
partially because he weighs 170 pounds.
Yeah, he's the third percentile
Pac-12
weight.
does have a lot of press coverage. I would tell you that much.
So
a lot of press coverage going on in Pac-12. Here's the thing: I am a big fan of Jordan Addison's personally. Obviously, I'm a USC fan, and I watched him a lot this year, and he was legitimately a game changer for the Trojans. Now, obviously, he's not a complete receiver. No one is in this draft, really. He does have a little more versatility, I think, than Jackson Smith and Jigba. He's played outside a lot in the Lincoln Riley system, as well as inside. He played both. He kind of did everything. He's not the most ideal build, and I think an NFL strength and conditioning staff will definitely help with that. USC, I mean, they're good. They have a decent, health and strength staff, but it's nothing crazy. We don't see like crazy athletes coming out of USC every day until they get really to the NFL. But I think he has a little bit more versatility than Jackson does. Also, though, a guy that I don't think realistically gets outside the top 15, top 20.
Yeah, there's the teams that I think really will. That he fits probably better with than he does even with the Chiefs, to be honest.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, because there's probably a little, we've said the Chiefs have kind of a lot of the skill sets that he might offer. Now, he might offer them a little bit better than the guys we have on the team, but there's definitely going to be some guys or some teams that need that position a little more.
And he might be better at it, but is that year 3 or is that next year?
I think it's a lot more accelerated than some other wide receiver prospects we have. Obviously, like we said, no one really takes off year 1 in Andy Reid, or really sometimes year 2. He does have a little more, at least I think, college experience. He's the only receiver in the draft with
he's more
over 3,000
experienced
college
than
yards.
Sky is by a mile and a half.
Sky is
that's not even close.
He was more than McCole was, really, as far as experience.
Well, yeah, of course.
Yeah, so I mean,
as far as
over
now, a couple
kind of recent wide receiver.
2 years of those snaps were at Pitt or whatever it was.
Yeah, 2 years at Pitt, and then he transferred to USC after.
So, and that's the thing.
Award.
He destroyed the Pitt conference. He destroyed the Big Ten, a lot of it, with a lot of what he was doing.
1,600 yards in 2021.
But that's a different level of. He was about the only receiver in the Big Ten. Partially why he decided to go where it was warmer. Catching the football in -10 is not as much fun as it is in 75 and sunny. So that's part of it. But like I said, I watched a lot of Addison, partially because I have one of my best friends is a massive USC fan. The other part is I'm a Notre Dame fan, so I get to see a lot of USC. No, one of my other best friends, actually.
Guilty.
But yes, Garrett also is a large USC fan. He struggles with press coverage and contact, for one, and I think a lot of it has to do with his size, and he doesn't have some of the hand techniques or the false step stuff off the line of scrimmage to combat some of the press stuff that he saw from some of the press corners that he ran into. Do I think that if he ended up in Kansas City, they would find ways to get him the football and keep him out of some of the areas where he struggles, as far as keeping him in, probably using him in motion. The only problem there is this isn't the CFL, and you can't put two guys in motion, and they're going to want to do that a lot with Tony and with Sky. So there again, we go back to, as Garrett mentioned, similar type of style skill sets where it's like, all right, he's good, but where's the fit?
Mhm.
Yeah, and I would definitely be the first one to admit, not the greatest fit in Kansas City. I think he's going to be a really good receiver in the NFL, just maybe not the best for Kansas City.
Yeah.
You got a point
And
there.
for his sake, I honestly would probably rather him go somewhere where it's going to be more of a fit, so you can actually see him excel.
Yeah, because he would immediately come in and be like the third.
Atlanta jumps off the page is something I would off to mind. They like guys like that. Detroit could use a guy like that. The Giants.
He's been comped a lot to Calvin Ridley, which is what the Falcons had for a little while there. So,
like I said, the Giants and a guy like that, because again, we just talked about him being. Now he's not nearly as fast as Kadarius, but stylistically and some of the things they would ask him to do would be similar, and they never really got to use that with Kadarius. So yeah. Like I said, Jordan Addison's fine. It doesn't make a lot of sense for Kansas City for me.
It doesn't move. Again, we're talking about like moving the needle. Like
I need difference makers. I need a difference maker.
Well, and here's the thing: if you're looking for that, you're going to have to go boom or bust in this draft. So
I don't really want to be in the first round. Is that what you're telling me?
So I know we're moving in on the 1 minute or the 1 hour mark. I know we talk. Let's talk about
20 on Odell, so that's part of the problem.
Yeah. Well, we just like the Ravens, we spent too much on Odell. So let's rapid fire a couple of other names in this class, and we'll try to get out of here at a reasonable time, just for our listeners' sake. So one other guy who I think at 31 I wouldn't hate, Zay Flowers at a Boston College. We were talking about him before. It's very similar. Listen, same flavor of what we were talking about, right? But I think that he has some traits that could make him be deployed in ways that are more unique than what some of the other guys who are undersized in this class.
Zay's the guy for me that I think where I would be like, all right, I understand what you just said. There's some similarities to some guys, but he also has more of that JSN could be more than he is, could play more roles than he does, and has a higher ceiling at it than a lot of the other guys in this class, while still maintaining a pretty good floor. And he played with, no offense, Boston College, but oh my God. Look, y'all, I'm a Notre Dame fan. I see Boston College at least once a year.
It was so bad.
That quarterback play is, well, the best quarterback, I think, in Boston College history is probably Matt Ryan, and I think the last time their quarterback was good was Matt Ryan. So we'll go with that, and we'll leave it there. And I'm not trying to take shots at the guys playing quarterback at Boston College, but there's levels to this.
There was a lot there that could have been.
And that dude went out and put up some numbers that were pretty ridiculous, and not just on, like we talked about, showing some at different positions. He ran outside routes. He played the X spot sometimes for them in that offense. He did some different things, being a single wide receiver and being the man in that offense, because he was no question. He was the guy in that offense at wide receiver.
Now, here's the thing, not to cut you off. Zay Flowers actually shorter than Sky Moore.
He is.
Smaller guy, but he's 9.25, 182. And again, none of these guys. Here's the thing about smaller receivers. Like even Sky Moore last year, who didn't run like the most blazing fast 40 time. Actually, he was still in the 82nd percentile, but his 10-yard split was 97th percentile. Right?
They're quick.
Yeah, you go to Zay Flowers, his 10-yard split's 68th percentile, 40-yard dash is 82nd percentile. Jordan Addison not looking much better. So I think Zay Flowers has some movement skills and some route running skills that you could really work with and you could gadget yourself into. Jalen Hyatt, let's talk about him because everybody talks about him a lot because he's a speed guy. I am going to get kicked off the podcast by Garrett with this take, but I'm all the way out on Jalen Hyatt.
That almost makes me all the way in.
Well, then me agreeing with Tom will probably help you finish that story because I don't see it.
Let me say this: Jalen Wyatt in the second round, sign me up. But essentially
at 62 or whatever though.
if you moved up a couple spots, give up a 5th rounder, whatever. Here's the thing: Jalen Hyatt, in my opinion, is essentially almost identical to what you would have got, like what you got in McCole Hardman, and that's not. It's again.
Oh dear God, I
Okay.
can't do another 3.5 years
that
of this.
bad, huh?
Oh,
Okay.
I can't do another 3.5 years of not
Are we
understanding
mad?
what.
Are we mad about that?
Yeah,
It's okay.
are
I'm
you
just kidding.
kidding?
I am kidding.
All right, guys.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining
I
us in
have
this
to-
episode of the Kingdom Says podcast. We're gonna go before we give our
I
our
spent
co-host
3
gotta find
Kyle.
years dealing with
You got-
that nonsense.
Once you find the
aneurysm.
right niche to hit on Kyle, it's
Strictly for any other reason
kidding,
other
Kyle.
than the
Yep.
fact that you just compared him to McCole and I don't want to listen to it for 3.5 years, I'm out. I'm all the way out.
So, all
that
right.
was good.
So,
you gotta find the right time.
here's my spicy take before the show open. I think
I
his
like Jalen
teammate
Hyatt.
Cedric Tillman. Will go before him. Listen, Jalen Hyatt's fine, but he is what he is, right? And you can't he's a one-year producer. He had an incredible game against Alabama. You want to see top end speed, and in some instances you do, but he had to play pretty much with no contact through the slot. They had to motion him around to get him open. Would the Chiefs find a way to make it work? Sure. Is he going to be 1,000-yard alpha dog, number one receiver? No. Best case scenario, I think you get at the very best case scenario, if you maximized everything and he, probably took some supplements that were accidentally mailed to Peyton Manning's wife, then you might get Brandon Cooks. But I don't.
Makes a
I
good
just
point.
don't.
Makes a good point.
I don't see it.
Are you telling me he could potentially come out with a forehead big enough to sell advertising space on by the
Maybe.
time we're done? All right.
Possibly.
Okay, Tom, hear me out though on Jalen Hyatt before we move on. The most likely guys that Kansas City would actually draft. How does he rank up there? Tom took his headphones off. He can't hear me.
You say most likely guys that Kansas City would.
I'm saying does he not fit a guy that Kansas City might draft? Does he not?
Yeah,
kind
to
of
torment
fit that
us.
mold?
Yes, that's great.
I'm not saying I'm not super clamoring from. I'm just saying he does seem like a realistic guy.
There's one requirement
Chiefs would
for players for that that they would take, and that is that I don't like them. He had solid stats at the combine. He's 6 foot and 1/8, 176 again, smaller guy. His numbers were good. 10 yard splits, 87th percentile, 40-yard jet dash. You wanted him to be a 4.3 guy, and he was a 4.4 guy, right? That's what it is,
4.3 guy is
right?
a 4.4 guy.
I will say his vertical at 40 inches was really good. His broad jump at 135 was really good. Those were 92 and 97th percentile.
Does it translate at all to the field? Because when I watch him on tape, I looked at the combine numbers. I was like, wow, those combine numbers are crazy. That's crazy. Because I watched that dude, and let me go back and make sure I'm not losing my mind. And I went back and watched him again. Where?
Yeah.
Where is it?
I don't see the jumping, the jump ball skills or anything
not
like that.
one time in any of the clips and any of the tape I could find on this dude. Look, his measurables are insane. He is in a good realm as far as RAS, as far as the Underwear Olympics, as far as all that is concerned, as Garrett as it's been dubbed.
Yeah.
I have no idea where it is on the football field.
Yeah.
None. It shows up like one every 100th play.
So let's talk.
I don't get it.
No, I mean you're right. It's rough.
For me, if you're taking Jalen Hyatt, it's like the 4th round. I'm sorry, but I don't know where the hype is from. I don't understand. Because I've seen it, and we all have seen it. The timeline's crazy. We all get to say I've seen the love. I don't get it.
As third wide receiver.
I know. That was the first thing that jumped out at me. I looked at the wide receivers in the guide out of the beast almost immediately because I was like, look, we're taking a wide receiver every year. We're gonna take one of them. Where is this at? His name being third on that list, I was like, what am I missing? Somebody tell me what I'm missing.
Listen, it could just be fatigue because I've watched these guys so many times that they're blurring together a little bit. Let me. I'm not gonna talk about Josh Downs. He's it's like a carbon copy of everybody else.
85 guys that are the same.
Let me give you one more name that I think is slept on in that small receiver category. Then we're gonna talk about the big guys that I do like. And I don't understand. I feel like I'm on an island with this one, and so maybe this is my bold take. But like Marvin Mims out of Oklahoma, why don't people like him more? I don't get it. I mean, I get it, but I think
I've seen some love for him on the timeline.
Marvin Mims is a kid that has done nothing
bit.
but every single thing that Oklahoma has asked him to do, whether that was Lincoln Riley or Brent Venables.
If you're looking for somebody who, like, if you're gonna bet on
4.38.
somebody, since the day he showed, yeah, exactly. He's
Yeah,
undersized,
that's a Big
but he
12
ran
wide
the
receiver, by the
4.38.
way, Garrett.
Yeah.
That's a Big 12 wide receiver.
So
Oklahoma's
if I'm
kind
gonna
of an
roll the
exception
dice,
to
like I
that
would let me just say this.
That's
put it
I
why
would
behind
you
take
stole their coach and paid for 2
Hold on.
houses for him.
Oklahoma.
I'm gonna find some
future
exceptions. All right.
future member of the SEC.
Yeah.
Listen, here's the deal with Marvin Mims. If I'm gonna take, like, if you give me the options of Marvin Mims in the third, or Josh
Yes.
Downs, or
Third
Jalen
round,
Hyatt
I'm
in the second,
in.
yeah, give me Marvin Mims. Even if you moved up for him in the third, I would take it. Right. So I think that there's the consistency there. You could use him.
He's
He's
played with good quarterbacks. He's
played with bad quarterbacks.
He's played with smart quarterbacks who are outside of the pocket, have to think about who he's played with. He played with Caleb Williams, right? He played with Spencer Rattler, right?
Yeah, we don't talk about that.
That's the anomaly, and he still put up numbers with Spencer Rattler.
Yeah.
That's Rattler.
I'm not disagreeing.
And before that is the Kyler and the Baker and all that crap in Norman with Lincoln, and all of that except for this year was in Lincoln Riley's system, and this year in a new system with a new quarterback, he was still good.
So that's my guy who, like, later in the draft, if you're like, all right, it's day 3, the Chiefs have grabbed a tackle on the defensive end,
even day 2, late day 2.
Yeah. So another name I'll just be honest, I haven't had a chance to dig into.
You're not on an island. I'm with you. I love Marvin Mims. I just thought I was alone.
Yeah. I've seen clips. Tyler Scott out of Cincinnati. Here's why they're gonna like him. Junior Olympic sprinter.
I got nothing. I never even heard the kid's name.
I can't say
10 of his 14 career touchdowns went for 30-yard plus. Again, if you want a guy who is in that home run.
Wait. Little bitty dude, played slot a lot for them, wore like 18 for them or whatever.
What did he wear?
Does he have long hair? I think he has long hair too. Or did. I remember watching him I remember watching one of their wide receivers in the title game or in the playoffs going, who's that dude?
Nope, this is 21. Not long haired. He's interesting. I need to look at him more, but he's a guy that some people that I respect have warmed up to. All right, let's talk about the big guys, and we're gonna get out of here. There's a couple of them, probably day 2, day 3 guys. So we already talked about Cedric Tillman, who I think is on the rise. I just said earlier, I think he's gonna end up going before Jalen Hyatt. Problem with him is he was hurt pretty much all of last year. But his 2021 tape, especially against some of the tougher opponents, Alabama, Georgia, he showed up and he played.
And the difference between him and JSN is there's not 7 guys that are also superstar aliens next to him at wide receiver. While
Tillman. Let's pull.
We were just arguing whether or not his counterpart was going to go ahead of him or not in the draft. If JSN came out with Garrett Williams and Chris Olave, JSN is going 3rd of 3 in that group, and it's not close.
Not even
so
because that last
he's 6'3", 213, not the fastest guy, but 4.54. That's okay.
I just wanted to give perspective for the same conversation we had, but with a different response to the exact same thing, so that people aren't like, well, that doesn't make sense. You're contradicting what you said earlier. No, those are different situations. Situations matter.
Yeah. So let me put this in perspective for you. Jordan Addison's 10-yard split, which is the first 10-yard in the 40-yard dash. His 10-yard split was 1.56. Cedric Tillman,
that's not bad, actually,
was 1.53 at 213. So
40 pounds heavier.
40 pounds heavier. And just a smidge faster. In the first 10 yards, Jordan did finish faster overall by about 5.05 seconds.
5 hundredths of a second. He beat him overall by 5 hundredths of a second.
So moving on, I think he has a chance he could, honestly, if the board fell horribly for Kansas City.
Oh dear Lord, don't do this. I know where this
And
is
there was a
headed.
run on receivers.
Do it. Do it.
He's going at 31, and I want to fly off a cliff.
I don't want him at 31, but sometimes the market. I doubt they take him at 31. I think they try to move down at that point. But
You are on drugs. They're not. They're taking a first round. Look. You want to talk about
There's a
Tom said
lot
stuff
of
about the betting
defensive-
market earlier?
A lot of defensive ends.
If you can find a book that will give you a yes, no, do the Chiefs make a first round pick? I don't care what the odds are on the words yes.
oh,
Hammer it by a
Ding, 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 ding,
billion.
ding. Not gonna trade down.
Take whatever is in your bank account and put it on yes, they're picking in the first round.
If you wait till the end of the first round, then more people are coming back the next day to see what happens on day 2. I'm just saying.
I
the business
do
perspective.
Imagine that
not
day 2 party.
care.
That
Do
day
you
two
know
party
how
would be
livid the fan base would be in Kansas City if they don't make a pick on night 1?
Yeah.
The Tuscaloosa fans.
Who
would
are
burn
we, the
city down.
Raiders?
Yeah. all right.
I can hear it. I can hear the Twitter. I can hear the tweets. I can hear them.
Yeah.
What? We had the
Okay,
draft in
okay.
Kansas City. We're not picking till day 3. What are we?
Yeah,
what are we
yeah.
Vegas?
All right,
What are we doing?
3 more guys, and I'm going to cut you guys loose. Rasheed
All right.
Rice at SMU. I loved him before the season. He had the best statistic season of his career, and probably my least favorite to watch.
I don't see it.
He
don't
gets a
get
lot of junk yardage. He gets fed the ball. Just so
I don't get it.
inconsistent. And my biggest
I don't
thing with
get it.
him is I don't know, like it's a how much do you really want it kind of thing. Like
I'm out.
there's just sometimes you see the flashes, you're like, oh, this kid's good. And then other times you're like,
Did he take a nap? Was he? Today
Yeah.
didn't matter that much, huh? Okay.
Yeah, but he's got good size, 6'1", 208.
No, not. They've been drafting captains and leaders and dudes, and all they want to do is work, and they love football. And
So 2 other names: Michael Wilson out of Stanford, a guy I need who had a really good Senior Bowl.
Out of where?
Stanford.
Dog, probably.
Now,
Smart dog.
had a really good Senior Bowl. His biggest thing is medicals all throughout his career. 6'2", 213, long arms.
The words "all throughout his career" make me uncomfortable at best.
Missed the second half of 2022. Missed the first half of 2021. So like you got to check his medicals out. But if you're talking like early day 3 and he's just chilling on the board, you could do worse. And I'm going to pair him with one other guy that I'm just now getting into, who I know has been on the timeline if you're following other draft people in Kansas City. Jonathan Mingo out of Ole Miss, which is a really fun name to say.
Okay. Now we're talking my language a little.
Now, and I get it, underwear Olympics, but 6'2", 220, 32 and an eighth inch arms, 10 and 3/8 inch hands. Those are all very much top of the class. 4.46 yard dash with a 1.54 10-yard split, 39.5 vertical, 10.9 broad, 22 bench. This dude had a combine.
Round 3,
solid combine.
Sign me the fuck up. I'm gonna apologize for that word and for those of you who have bad ears.
And we're canceled. I'm just kidding.
Yep.
Sign me up. Y'all.
There goes the
3rd
podcast.
round. Well, you get like 1 or 2 an episode. They don't care.
Sorry, if they made it an hour and 8 minutes in, that's a little treat for them.
Yeah, it's okay. It's at the very end.
All right, here's the deal. If
How,
you look up,
dude? Come on. Like, if you asked me to build a receiver in a lab,
Yeah, if I say Jonathan Mingo might be up there.
that dude is laboratory. Now,
he's not going to be there in round 3.
Hold on. Skill set's not quite as refined as I would like in some areas. There's still some stuff I would like a little bit more develop on. But if I got to walk in and go, I want that, and that as a physical trait aspect for a wide receiver, yeah, that's pretty much the dude.
If you look at his little mock draftable chart where it spreads out where they are, the percentiles.
I would even be good with him in a second.
Right. So
take your edge or whatever in the first. And
I don't think he's going to be there in the first or in the third. He's just so. Not really productive.
Don't care. Don't care.
Now,
do not. He played at Old Miss.
Now,
Name their quarterback. I'll wait.
Here's the thing, and
Eli Manning.
sometimes I read these things and I go, did you say Yao Ming?
He said Eli Manning, which is almost as funny.
um,
Yeah,
I need to watch some more Mingo. I think he's been like
Only a
I
couple
don't.
years late, right?
He might go earlier than I
just
think.
a couple, Garrett.
But oh, he's a guy that on the radar. Really enjoyed him. I yeah. So I think he's a guy to keep an eye on. The biggest thing for him in terms of fitting in Kansas City is he going to be able to separate? Is he going to be able to create some space? But like ball in his hand, he has some really fun deep ball stuff. Again, quarterback play was not the best, but their offense was interesting.
Look, even if he can't separate, the dude is so built to be a wide receiver that most of the corners in this league, even if they're hugging him, if Patrick throws the ball to where his hands are, he's catching it. I'm sorry. I know that he's not the guy, but this team is. If I'm going to bet on a wide receiver for year 2 or 3, that's the dude I'm betting on.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not getting year 1 unless he's a god. And I'm sorry, but we've just spent an hour and 15 minutes talking about how this wide receiver class is lacking any of those. So, if you're going to spend the draft capital, the position that I think we need the least out of our needs is wide receiver, even though that's the one everybody wants to talk about because it's fancy.
Yeah.
And frankly, it's because your quarterback is 15, and when people finally start to actually understand that, it will make this process a little easier for the fan base to get a hold of. But because we've been clamoring for we started with Robert Woods last year, and it's never stopped. And we've gone now through Odell and DeAndre Hopkins and everybody under the sun. And look, at the end of the day, they won a Super Bowl last year. And by the time the wide receivers were done, Marcus Kemp was catching the game-winning freaking pass. In a couple, look, y'all.
Got a big one, AFC Championship.
I am all about making sure Patrick has weapons. I'm also aware of the understanding that if they're not elite, that's okay, because the guy under center makes them elite. You spent 25 years watching a dinosaur who has half the athletic and talent that Patrick has in his pinky for the most part, do it with bum athlete and bad wide receiver after another in New England. Now everybody's worried about the guy who's got 58,000 times the talent being able to make wide receivers around him better. And by the way, he's getting advice from the guy before him because for whatever reason, the guy before him that I was just talking about really likes the kid. Hey, man, I'm sorry, but I don't need a wide receiver in the first every year. I really don't. Second, third, fourth, develop guys, pick and choose, sign prove-it deals like MVS and Juju. You don't have to spend a ton of money at the wide receiver position when you have the quarterback. Build a defense. Jesus Christ. Take New England's blueprint, for the love of God. Look at it. He didn't have a top 10 defense. Ever. Anytime Tom was successful. Top 10 defense.
Great points. Kyle was making some great points here. Isn't that right?
Draft an edge. Trade up for your guy. Find your dude in the first round. And then take a Mingo in the second. Or a Zay Flowers if he's still there late in the second. Where you have to trade up and go get it. Whatever it is. But there is zero. And I mean this wholeheartedly, zero reason to trade up or draft a wide receiver in the first round unless there is just one staring you in the face that just fell there.
Jordan Jackson.
And next time we'll talk about what if the Chiefs take a tight end instead.
I'm all down for that too, because the tight end classes in the next 2 to 3 drafts, this draft and the next 2 are better than the wide receiver class, and it's not close. Sorry.
No. So eventually the Chiefs are going to have to find a receiver to grow in-house. Is it this year? Options?
I don't think so.
Who knows?
But not early. I hope they do find one this year, just not early. I don't want to do it first round. I definitely don't want to do it first round.
If my bald head were a magic 8-ball and you shook me up right now, the little triangle that would appear would say outlook uncertain.
And
That
not
is very
looking
valid.
favorable would be the other option after you shook it the second time to
Not
hope
so.
for a better answer.
You know,
And if you shake it too many times, you're going to hear the Chiefs should have took DK Metcalf over McCole Hardman. And with that, I
I
have
mean,
no
they
more
should
things to
have.
say for this episode. Garrett,
Jesus
take us
Christ.
home.
Yeah. One more guy I wanted to talk about, Tom, real quickly here. We talked about
JJ Arcega-Whiteside too, huh?
we talked
No,
about
go
a
ahead.
lot. We talked about a lot of top receivers in the draft, but maybe absolute lock for Kansas City in the 6th or 7th round. Anyone have any guesses potentially? I'll
Oh,
There's
tell
a
you.
few names that jump to
I'll tell
mind, but
you.
I'm
I'll
curious
tell
as to
you
where you were going.
the
Puka
exact
Nakua.
lock. Puka
Puka Nakua.
Nakua. There he
That's
is.
one.
BYU stud.
Yep. BYU kid. That's exactly why he was. I was like,
Yep.
that
Absolute
screams Andy.
stud. 6'1", 201. Has a very average RAS score, but he went to BYU, and he's going to be a special teams dog in this team for at least
Andy
4
and Dave
years.
have found their next.
I mean, he's going to be a dog special teamer. All right, like the dog meter as far as special teams for him in this on the Chiefs.
Oh,
it's
in
up
case
there.
you guys missed it, Garrett is going to be running a dog meter from
Dog
now
meter.
moving
Yeah.
forward for player
People are gonna
rankings
get
on his
the-
evaluations.
All
That's
right.
his
Every
stat.
evaluation.
He's not going to do any other evaluations really statistically or player
told
wise
you- I
other
told
than
you
dog
guys.
factor. So
I told you guys I'm not a big real stats guy. You know, I like those non-fake stats. I like
The
the things that you
dog-o-meter.
can't quantify. You know, the
get
dog
you.
meter.
We'll have to figure something out with that.
It's
We'll get a
a-
meter or whatever we can drop
Yeah.
here. We can play it.
Yeah.
We'll figure something out for you.
Listen, it can be on a scale from cat to scout. Scout's the top end of the dog scale.
Scout is the top dog.
Hey,
Cat
I
is
don't
the
know.
top
dog.
We would might have to have a little
Tank,
discussion
actually.
because I have
Tank.
I'll
is a
give you all a
tank.
little sneak peek here. There's a that over there in the corner
That guy's a tank right there.
currently occupying a bed that's the size of most humans sleep on. He would love to have that conversation if you want to have the who's the dog around
Listen,
here.
Scout is
Scout,
definitely more of a wide receiver.
Is the more
you know.
interactive poster.
He's a wide
in the
receiver
Yeah.
type thing. He's going to be that Jordan
He
Addison
hears us
type
talking
guy,
about him. He's
you know.
barking at me.
Tank, on
Yeah.
the other hand, that is Tyree
That's more your
Wilson,
D
you know.
lineman.
That is exactly.
Yeah.
That's Miles Murphy. That's Lucas Van Ness. Those are some dogs up there. But yeah, great episode. We covered a lot of wide receiver options, and there's so many guys, and it's really kind of a, like we kind of said, it's kind of a crapshoot. It's kind of
And if we didn't talk about your receiver that you think we should have talked about, we did. His name was just
Yeah.
different in this episode
Exactly. We
because
probably did. He's just
85% of
the
these dudes are the same.
He's the exact same mold as someone else. But we might have Brett Veach and his team are phenomenal, and they really go the extra mile to identify some key characteristics in these guys. So I mean, that is, like I said, the thing that you can't quantify is a lot of similar receiver builds and styles, but it's the mental side, that's a big factor. How smart they are, what their offense they were in, all that good stuff. So there's gonna be some guys that we probably haven't heard of that are gonna make their names called a lot earlier than expected. But yeah, for the Chiefs' sake, like Kyle kind of said, really don't really see him going around one receiver. It's unless there's just nobody left on the board and there's some
There's
guys
just
that
not
fell.
that dude in this class.
There really isn't. And if they're and they're not going to be there at 31 or anywhere close to that if he gets a dude. So TBD, but that gives us some options to look at for wide receiver to keep our eyes on us upcoming draft. Thank you all so much for tuning in on this one. Be sure to follow us at Kingdom Says Pod, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, or watch us over at YouTube, the Kingdom Says Podcast. We have Tom.
Subscribe. All those locations.
Subscribe, leave a review, all that good stuff. Tom is going to be
Please.
putting out a bunch of YouTube videos and stuff like that, going over more prospects and whatnot. We had a top fives offensive tackle and edge rusher build video go up there. That one's pretty cool. So
Make sure you guys stay tuned into the YouTube shorts and the TikTok and the Instagram. We're going to have a bunch of clips, prospects, cuts, cut-ups, all that stuff you guys are wanting for these individual players to keep track of. There, it's all going to be on there. The more you guys hit those YouTube shorts, the more we'll put out. The more players Tom will be happy to pop on there for you if you help us out and show us that you're watching them. It's really easy.
Exactly.
Watch it, and we'll give you more.
So with that being said, thank you all for watching and listening. We will be seeing you very soon for some more great draft talk. We've got a lot of positions to go and a lot of
Lots of
talk
stuff
about.
to do in the next couple
So,
weeks.
Have a good weekend. I hope everyone had a great Easter weekend, and draft is almost here, baby. Adios.